All right, we are live on YouTube and live on Zoom.
Okay, there's only a few of us here. Mike, do you want to wait a couple minutes, see if anybody else shows up, or do you have advance notice people aren't going to make it?
I have no advance notice. The clock just turned 5:30. At your discretion, Mayor, we can either go forward or we can wait a few minutes.
Why don't we wait a couple minutes, see if people straggle in?
Okay.
I believe that Mr. Doherty is not able to make this call.
With that being said, with 6 out of 7, Mayor.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Hopefully all of the council members received the council briefing notice with the list of 7 items. I'm not sure we'll be able to tackle all 7 tonight. Any of those that we don't get to before our break point of 6:45, we can carry over to the next council briefing on August 3rd. But of the 7 that are on there, the one that I wanted to start with first was number 7, which is direction on the budget showcase in the workshops. Staff had originally anticipated that we might be in a different situation where we would be holding all of those in person. And I'd like to get some feedback from council as to whether or not you think that should be done in person for both the showcase and the workshops, or whether we should try and do those virtually. And with that, if each of you could please provide me your thoughts, that would be greatly appreciated.
I'll start. My vote's virtual, as long as we're doing the, as long as it's in the capability of the staff and minimizes exposure to the council members and the staff. That's my recommendation.
I'll go ahead. I had court this morning via Zoom, and the judge says that they're looking at January before even opening the courthouse. So I don't think, if we're not opening the courthouse, I don't see why we'd be open City Hall. So.
I agree with Mayor Latham. I think especially with the showcase, since we haven't been doing kind of the in-person tour anyway, that Zoom should suffice, I feel like, to get the points across.
I think I agree the Zoom piece, but in addition to it's how we've been meeting, it also gives people a lot more opportunity to actually see the budget overview and then the different budget workshops if it's been recorded on Zoom. So people who can't make it on a Friday afternoon are able to see what the city has been doing with their tax dollars.
And I support doing it virtually as well.
Okay, that's 5. So that's more than a consensus to go virtual.
Concur.
6 for 6. Excellent. Thank you. With that being said, normally we would have PowerPoint presentations during the budget showcase. We will plan on doing those all virtually, where they'll basically be on the screen for everyone to view. I do like the concept of having it all recorded so that we can put that video recording out on the website for residents to take a look at as well. And then the workshops, never having done those virtually before, we'll work out the appropriate format for doing so. But I think we should be able to get through it all virtually without any problems. So thank you for your feedback on that. The next item that I wanted to jump into was item number 1. I think this request for review was from Councilor Vogel, saying he wanted to walk through where we were with the council priorities that had been identified a little over a year ago. Each of you should have received a copy of what I like to call the bar chart or the Gantt chart, which has all of the different council priorities listed, and it talks about where we are in the process on each one, and I'd like to walk you through those. They might not necessarily be in the same order that they appear on that sheet, but the first one was with regards to the Council Code of Ethics, and that's one that we knocked out earlier this year and has been put into place. The second one was with regards to a traffic policy, which we've also put into place and is currently being enacted on by the police department. The third one is with regards to the charter review, And that was broken into two phases, a phase 1 charter review and phase 2 charter review. Phase 1 was to propose some intermediate changes to the charter based on council direction and to make sure that we got those in position to be on the ballot this November. That has been done and is ready to proceed forward on the ballot. The next phase is a complete charter overhaul, a full-blown charter review with a charter review committee. The city attorney is currently in the process of setting up some virtual meetings with our attorney of record for this particular project. And we are hoping that some point at the end of summer or early fall, we'll be starting that next phase of the process of identifying what the process will be, the charter review committee attendees, et cetera, and then laying out the time frame. We do anticipate that that particular project will likely take 12 to 18 months in order to complete. But again, we are looking at starting it before the term of this particular council ends in November or beginning of December. The next item on there was comp plan amendments and the evaluation and appraisal report. That's something that Mr. Mann's been working on and planning. It looks like there may be some ways to streamline the EAR process. And then we'll be able to roll into the phase 2 of land development code. Phase 1 was bringing back to council the packet of LDC changes that had been rejected back in 2018. That was done earlier this year and was ultimately approved by council. So once we get through the evaluation and appraisal reporting with the state, we'll be able to jump into phase 2, which would be an overhaul of the LDC based on council input and community input into some very specific areas based on what we heard through some community conversations and probably some additional input as well. The next two items on there are the community vision and the strategic plan. The community vision we're actually going to talk about, I believe, next on the agenda. But clearly those are things that are in process and ready to start moving forward based on council's review of the data that we have. The community vision, again, was to identify a vision statement for the community and then to take information that we've started hearing from the community and input from the council to start funneling that down into a very specific strategic plan that the organization can respond to over a long-term environment to come up with some meaningful impact on the community. And I think for those of you that attended any of those particular meetings, there was actually quite a bit of overlap from meeting to meeting. So that was all good information that's been received to date. The only item that is basically has not been started and is in a hold pattern is the last item that you see on the list, which was the Citizens Academy. That's one that we've not been able to sink our teeth into yet, but it's also strategic that that one's being postponed because the Citizens Academy would result in people meeting in person to get exposure to the different operations of the city. So of everything that we've had to push out, this is one that actually has the least impact, so to speak, because of the situation we're in with COVID. With that being said, there were also some organizational priorities listed at the bottom. The ERP, the purchasing policy, and our internal overhaul of administrative policies and procedures. I'm sorry, I did skip one. The legislative policies manual is in progress. We did have a meeting last week with the clerk's office, who's been tasked with assembling this document. We are still on path at this point to bring a document back to council sometime in the fall for your formal adoption. The goal is that the plan be adopted before the election so that when a new council is seated, that new legislative policies manual can be handed out to the new seated council at the end of November, beginning of December. And we are on track with that. With that being said, are there any questions that council has with regards to the projects and the progress we've made at this point in time? And Councilor Golding?
Mike, if you could just clarify for me, the two items at the bottom that are organizational priorities and admin policies and procedures, I don't see that those have any specific timeline to them. Is that because they're just ongoing, or is there a time frame that those are to be addressed?
We've not assigned a time frame to that. That is catch as catch can, so to speak. The administrative policies need a lot of work. Some of them haven't been updated in excess of 15 to 20 years. So we're taking it piecemeal, so to speak. But the other work has been identified as the tier 1 priorities, and the administrative policies and procedures is tier 2 from mine and Karen's perspective. So we're using that as kind of piecemeal, so to speak. We're taking it one bite at a time.
And then just to clarify, so even though we don't have our strategic plan done, we do have the comp plan amendment and EAR starting fourth quarter of 2020, because that will be EAR work as opposed to things that would be specific to changing the comp plan based on the strategic plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I can get you more information specifically from Bill on that. And Councilmember Vogelsang.
I kind of missed what you talked about on the LDC. So we're in the process of evaluating the entire LDC, because I know it's on the books here for fourth quarter of 2021. So I'm just wondering why the lengthy delay.
The changes in the LDC would follow whenever we complete the comp plan amendments in the EAR. Those are the overarching documents before we get into the specifics of the LDC. If Bill can streamline the process of the comp plan amendments in the EAR, then the phase 2 LDC will slide forward in the schedule. So that is a worst case scenario of how long it would take to do an EAR. If we can do it in shorter time frame, and I think Bill's got a few suggestions or a few thoughts of how we can do it through it much quicker, that'll put us into a position to tackle it earlier. And I see Bill has his hand raised, so I'm going to let the Planning and Development Director actually speak on this item. Bill, you can take it away.
Mike, sorry, you happened to schedule this briefing right at the launch of the SpaceX. So I watched SpaceX and then ran in here real quick, and it went off successfully, which is awesome. The biggest thing about the EAR is we are required to either commit to doing an EAR upon our normal, I think it's a 7-year cycle, or explain to DEO, what used to be DCA, why we are not. And in my letter, I told them that it was impractical to do an evaluation and appraisal report of our comprehensive plan when we've got pending census data that will be available to us next year. That's number one. Number two, statutorily, we have kept up with all of the new growth management changes. So from a regulatory standpoint, our comp plan is accurate at this point. We were not required to do an EAR at this snapshot in time. I do feel that we will do one once we get the new census data, but right now, in terms of their schedule, DEO has accepted our letter that we're not doing an EAR at this time. You may remember we just got approved the resiliency amendments. That was the last statutory change that everybody in the state had to deal with, every coastal community had to deal with. So we're okay statutorily, and I really don't think it's appropriate to do EAR until we get this new census data. So that's kind of where that is right now.
And Bill, just as a reminder, we did receive a letter back from DEO, and refresh my recollection, did they indicate that they were comfortable with us not proceeding with the EAR at this time?
I have received no objection from DEO as to our response about not doing an EAR at this point, and which to me tells me they concur with the fact that we are up to date statutorily, and I know we are. I mean, that's part of what I do. We are up to date statutorily.
So with that being said, Councilor Vogelsang, if we're able to put the EAR behind us, at least in the short term, my suggestion would be if there are specific elements of the LDC that the council wants to focus on over the next several months, we could certainly put that on for a future briefing to talk specifically about that, get input from council, and Bill could develop the appropriate time frame for amending those elements of the LDC.
I think that would be important just based on the community response and discussions and just where I've been for the last 8 years and trying to get it changed, and the fact that especially with just lot coverage and variance issues, because we're bombarding our boards right now with variance requests that I think are unnecessary. So that's where I kind of lend my focus into getting it changed sooner than later, because right now it's pretty ridiculous for the number of applications we're requiring people to get for minimal variances.
Consensus from council to put an item on one of the upcoming briefings, specifically to talk about targeted areas of the LDC for updates?
I don't have a problem with it generally, but we also have to remember that we're waiting for the vision and the strategic plan to really make sure that we get alignment. So I don't want to do quick changes now and then have to change them again in the future. So I'm not opposed to it, but we really have to think long and hard about how this is going to fit in with the larger strategy of where the city is trying to go in the future.
Any other comments on that? And Bill, I think you can lower your hand on the app.
Okay.
I would just say that I agree with Ms. Dumont, because I feel like the strategic plan is a long-term, it's a long-term plan for us. And I think that our city attorney would agree that we don't want to change something now that we would then have to turn around and change again in the LDC, because our strategic plan indicated that we needed to do something differently. I think that puts us in a position of in a difficult position if we put something in the LDC and then we turn around and change it.
I agree. I like the holistic approach. I think we just need to keep everything moving with some degree of purpose.
We'll go ahead and put something on a future briefing. And if the elements that we're talking about within the LDC are somewhat standalone, then it would make sense that we could move forward with them. And if there's a consensus that any individual items need to be held until such time as a more detailed plan, then we can put those in particular on the back burner. Does that sound like an appropriate approach? I see heads nodding. That's a good thing. Okay, excellent. Any other comments on the city council initiatives before we move on to the next item? Hearing none, we will move on to item number 2, which was the community visioning summary. The summary that you were provided is a draft. It is a working draft. There was an 8th meeting, a second one with the businesses that was held last week, of which that information, I believe, was incorporated into the document that you all received. The direction that I'm looking from council tonight on this particular item is whether or not you feel there is enough information to move forward with creating a vision for the community, or whether or not you feel there are gaps in the information that need to be filled in before we can move forward. What you've received is basically an executive summary of each of the 8 meetings that was held. There's also a cover memo attached as well. That was my personal take on what I heard coming out of those particular meetings, along with some identified vision statements for commensurate communities around the state of Florida and around the country as a whole. So clearly tonight isn't the night to actually go through and try and develop what the vision statement is or the justification behind it for the community, but it's for council to tell me whether or not there's enough information or whether we need to gather a little bit more and plug some holes before we move forward. So with that, I'd be happy to take whatever questions or hear the comments that you have. And I see the first hand raised is Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. When we're with regard to businesses, what we've heard a lot from is hospitality sector businesses, very few service, like personal service businesses. And I think that we need to hear more from those who aren't reliant on food and alcohol, those who just have some kind of a business purpose. And I am horrible with names and I don't have them in front of me, but there is a national HR staffing organization in downtown and they bring a great name to Jacksonville Beach. they're in the national news. Another one would be the Generation W. The office is here in Jacksonville Beach. Yet we haven't heard from that, and the person who runs that also owns other property in which she's trying to develop for another business. There's the t-shirt place on Cheddar that I know I had my t-shirts done on. So there are a lot of other businesses that aren't necessarily focused on visitors, but are focused on a personal service business. And I'd like to hear from more of those. So I don't know if we should do a stratified random sample of the businesses that we have in Jacksonville Beach, and then do invitations to just those businesses based off of the business licenses that the clerk's office would have. I prefer not to handpick businesses. And I understand we can put it on Facebook to try and get people to them, but a lot of people aren't on Facebook. And you can make the argument, well, if you're a business and you're not on Facebook, blah, 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 but Facebook has changed its algorithm. So when you post something as the city, it's not going into everybody's feed. So, and we need to be conscious of that as well. So there's two parts, I guess three. One, I'd like to see more small businesses that are not hospitality focused. The second piece is how we identify those businesses in a stratified random sample, the stratification being businesses, local businesses, and then specifically the types of businesses, non-hospitality. And the third one is how do we get that information out to them? So we need a timeline for like a 2-3 week window that they'd have a chance to sign up. That would be my suggestion, because we don't have that voice in the information in all of the focus groups.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Vogelsang.
Are you just looking for information to develop just a vision statement, or are you looking for more information to develop the vision type plan?
The vision statement is one part of it's the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. If what the vision of the community is, then all of the data that we've heard from each of the different sessions, so to speak, start to fill in where the priorities for a strategic plan might lie. So for instance, if you take a look at the draft document that I sent out, let me turn to it real quick here. Common themes that were heard through the community conversations, which could lend themselves to a priority within a strategic plan, would be the preservation of neighborhoods, would be improved mobility for non-automotive means within the community, specific improvements to downtown, to making it work for the residents, not just the visitors, the improvement of aesthetics throughout the community. Those were all common themes, so to speak, that popped up through those community conversations. Those may end up being a priority within the strategic plan, where the council develops very specific policy goals and objectives based upon them. But again, most of what you see in here was based on 6 sessions with residents and 2 sessions with the business community. So the question for council is that representative of the community, or do we need to hear more before you all have the opportunity to weigh in on the vision statement, and we can actually bring in an outside facilitator to help structure an actual strategic plan? So as Council Member Dumont just indicated, she feels that there's a little bit of a gap in the business community, that we need to go out and target some additional information specific to small professional businesses or service related businesses, in that it needs to be a representative sample, probably taken from our BTR listing.
I don't have a feeling one way or another. I feel like just looking at a couple other vision statements for other cities similar to ours, it kind of lays out, like the one that kind of struck me was even the one I read for Palm Coast, which said friendly and welcoming manner toward visitors, residents, and businesses. Your strategic plan is going to hit all 3 of those. if there's anything that we've missed, our business community can read this. We can put the information out from the business sessions to the business members that Ms. Dumont mentions, and they can offer any more insight they want to. But for purposes of preparing a vision statement and gathering a good basis for which to create the strategic plan, I think we have plenty of information.
Okay, thank you. We'll jump over to Counselor Golding.
So the gap that Ms. Dumont mentioned is actually a good point. And I know that there was one particular business that wanted to participate in this last Wednesday's business meeting, but they were unable to because the meeting was full. And that would have been one of those businesses because they're not in the hospitality area. So it really would have been nice to have been able to hear what their thoughts were. So I agree. I think that we could be missing out on some information that is very, very different from, when you're talking to a different type of business than a hospitality business. So I agree that I'd really like for us to try to get some input from those types of businesses. And then from a resident standpoint, if we had 6 sessions with residents and there were 10 people per session, that's 60 people, and we've got 24,000 residents, I'm a little concerned that that's a really, really, really small sampling of our community. But I also realize that realistically, we don't want to have a whole ton of people either provide input. But my concern would be that I know that there were some people who tried to sign up for meetings as well, and for the residential meetings, and they were not able to. They got put on a waiting list. So I don't know if there's some way that we could do something kind of like the Parks and Rec survey that was done, which I thought was a really, really good survey. And it gave people an opportunity to put their thoughts in there rather than just, pick answers A, B, C, D, or whatever to provide some free-form thought. So I don't know if we might want to do something like that to be able to get some additional input from people who were not able to attend the meetings that we held. So I'd like for us to consider maybe trying to see if we could get a little more information, both from the businesses and the residents.
Okay, thank you. And Vice Mayor Hoffman.
Thank you. Again, I just wanted to commend you for putting these together and how they were run. I think they were handled really smoothly. And I think a lot of people at the very beginning thought they might turn into kind of gripe sessions, and they really consistently were quite the opposite. So thank you for that. If we had gone back to the very beginning, I probably would have supported a little more of a scientific approach to how we gathered the people of each of the focus groups, to have more of a representative sample, gender, race, age, types of business, things like that. But we didn't. And across the board, I think except for the first business meeting, they were all self-selected. So I know in terms of after the first business meeting, I had asked to do another business meeting for smaller businesses outside of the downtown. So I was glad we were able to do that. And I probably emailed 40 different business owners. And I think that the reason that people in the hospitality industry jumped at the opportunity was because they have a little more skin in the game of this discussion versus having an office in the community. But I will say, even in that group, there was an insurance agent, a computer programming company, and then in the larger business meeting, we had a realtor. So I think we had, and I don't remember all of the attendees from the resident meetings, but certainly we had more representation there than we probably realized. That being said, again, if we could go back in time and redo how we solicited the input, I would probably have done that differently at that time. But at this time, the question, do we feel like we got enough information? I would say I feel very comfortable that we got enough information from the groups that we talked to, because we saw so much consistency among what the different groups were saying across the board, even from the various different sectors. So I feel like we've got enough. I feel like I certainly wouldn't object to doing another meeting, but I don't think it's necessary. I think we'll hear more of the same general themes.
Thank you. Back to Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. So I just want to address a couple things. First, with Phil and the vision that you read is the most vanilla vision that I think and I argue with businesses when they try and do those vanilla visions where it can go, you can plug it into any business and it doesn't really say who you are or as an organization. So our vision should be the vision of what makes us unique. Why do they want to come to Jack's Beach and not Palm Coast, Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach, and places on the Gulf? That should be part of the vision. The mission's even more refined. That is the road on how you get to that vision. Think about a horizon, and the vision is on the other side of that horizon. It's what we envision the city being in the future, and we'll never get there, but the mission is how we're going to try and achieve that vision. With Sandy and the residents, I would agree that, yeah, we'd love to have more residents. But one way that when you're doing research is, when you've done a good amount of research, when you keep reading the same things over and over and over again, at that point, there's a very slim chance that something's going to change. With regard to Chris, with the businesses, the hospitality versus a lot of the professional businesses, they're looking at it through two different lenses. They've had different experiences when it came to setting up a business in Jacksonville Beach. And we didn't even touch on that. I think we briefly touched on that, where I know hospitality businesses have gotten a little bit more pushback when it comes to setting up businesses because of a liquor license and location. So I do think that at least one with professional businesses can lend a lot of information to how we answer the question when a professional business is thinking about moving to Jacksonville Beach, why they should move here. This is what our other professional businesses say, and this is their experiences. This is why you should set up your office and your shop in Jacksonville Beach, not elsewhere. So I do think that there could be a lot of good information on that. And if there isn't, it's 90 minutes. And it's just more information. It could just be like another resident group that we're learning more about what we've already heard. But I'd be interested in hearing those different dynamics, because the parking is different, the structures are different, the locations are different. So there are a lot of LDC aspects that are different for professional than for hospitality. And the couple that you mentioned haven't really, another concern was that minus Sam, they haven't been around that long. And so they haven't seen the change in dealing with the city as a business over time. Some maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. So I'd like to see just a little bit more depth.
Mayor or Councilor Nichols, would either of you like to weigh in on this topic?
I hear a lot of good comments that are, make a lot of sense, and I could go down the line. I'm like Georgette did and talk about each person's comments. I think it's important that we keep the focus and move forward on this. This is probably one of the biggest, most challenging projects that we take on. And it's not something that you want to put haphazardly together at the last minute, but the more intel we can get, the more feedback we get from local folks. So I tend to agree that it'd be a good idea to get to the non-hospitality businesses as well, give them an opportunity to come in and talk. And then let's get the process started.
Councilor Nichols?
I have nothing additional.
All right, I think I've got my direction on this. Any other questions or comments on the process at this point? Hearing none and seeing no hands raised, we'll move on to item number 3, parking waivers for Ocean Rescue and others. This was an item that was brought up earlier about whether or not there's something we could do for the people who volunteer for the city or work for the city who are currently being required to pay for parking in our downtown lots when they come to perform their services for the city. And I asked both Ashley Gossett, our CFO, and our city attorney, Chris Ambrosio, particularly to take a look at this issue and put an option out in front of council for consideration. So this is really their pitch at this point as to whether or not this is something you'd want us to put in place. So Chris and Ashley, I'll let the two of you take it away from here.
I'll let Ashley start. She has the better ideas always.
So when the city manager presented this to us, we looked at it from a couple different directions. If we're trying to meet the needs of our lifeguards, we have about 80 or 90 lifeguards right now working different cycles. So we thought maybe the most efficient way of approaching it is for the lifeguards who are not Jack's Beach residents with their parking or their license plates already registered with the city's residential parking program to submit their receipts to their supervisor each month, and then we would reimburse them for the cost of parking in the parking lots when they are on shift only.
One of the nice parts about doing it as a reimbursement basis is the fact that we would not have to make any changes to our existing ordinance. Is that correct, Chris?
That's right. That was going to be the more complicated way that didn't necessarily arrive at a better solution than the one that Ashley just described. And just let me add that Ashley also suggested during our meeting that, perhaps these particular people can just provide their receipts every 30 days. So it's not like they have to come in the day after they utilize the parking, but they can come back, they can come around every 30 days and submit all of those receipts for the month period. We can reconcile those against the department records to show that they did in fact work during that time frame, and then reimburse them after that 30-day period. It seemed to be the more simple fix. It arrived at a solution rather than us having to modify, change, or add to the, not even to the parking program, but to our parking section of our code.
So when this was originally brought up, it was to cover those people that were volunteering for the city or who were working for us in some capacity that had to pay for parking. We think this is the best alternative going forward. If they are a Jack's Beach resident and they're driving their personal vehicle, obviously their plate could be registered to where they don't have to pay anything downtown. But if they are driving a vehicle that is not registered, or they're from outside the area and they're coming to the city, they can save their receipts, and we would look at doing a reimbursement at the end of each month. With that being said, Ashley and Chris are both available for questions. And Vice Mayor Hoffman, I see you have your hand raised.
Kudos for coming up with a very simple solution. I didn't see that coming, but I just want to make sure that this would cover not only the Ocean Rescue working on Saturdays, but also the Volunteer Lifesaving Corps on their volunteer time on Sundays and holidays.
We could expand this to whatever group of volunteers or employees that the city thinks appropriate. If council feels that we should be covering all volunteers, not just Ocean Rescue or the Corps, but others who might be volunteering for us in some capacity, we could certainly write that up as an internal policy that volunteers receive free parking, and they basically would submit their receipts to whoever the person is that they're reporting to within the city. And with that, Mayor, I see you have your hand raised.
Mike, what volunteers are we talking about?
Right now, it's pretty much pinned down to Ocean Rescue and the Lifesaving Corps.
Okay, so it's basically the lifeguards is what we're talking about. We're not talking about any other folks.
That's correct, unless council thought there were other groups of volunteers that we wanted to expand this to that you could think of.
Okay, I was just interested on when this was put together and you started having the discussion with staff, what the target was. So appreciate it.
And Counselor Dumont?
Yeah, another group of volunteers you might want to think about are the CPA folk. When we have Moonlight Movies, they're down there doing fingerprinting of kids as well as bike registration. And they have to park in those lots as well. And since it's a weekend, there would be a fee involved with that. And I think that the fingerprinting starts at 5, I believe. And that's about when the parking starts. So I might want to include that group as well. They tend to be a little bit on the older side, and we would like to have them park closer to the pavilion area.
We did talk to Thomas Crumley about some of those extra events, and that there may be other events where volunteers might assist at, and we wouldn't want to put a volunteer in a place of having to spend money in order to help the community or help the city in a community event. And Crumley completely agreed, and I think Ashley agreed with that as well. So there would be those other exceptions where citizens are volunteering and providing their time, and we would reimburse them for any parking expense that they incurred during that volunteer time. Again, it's the simple solution of just submitting their receipt was genius, as simple as it was.
Is that something you're all comfortable with the CPA as well, or any other type of downtown events where we're asking volunteers? Seeing a lot of head nodding. Good. Any other questions, or Vice Mayor Hoffman?
Yes, again, thank you for the simplicity and all this. I just want to make sure that, and I do agree with the CPA. I like that this puts the onus on the volunteer to make sure they get their receipts in. So hopefully, some people just may not worry about it or may not bother, but the people who this really is a cost impediment, the lifeguards come out there, they're paying more to park all day than they make in an hour. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about ocean rescue employees on Saturdays and the other volunteers, I guess as determined by the city. But I want to make sure that even the staff are included in this, the ocean rescue staff. Okay, thank you.
Yep. And Councilor Nichols.
I guess my question is, you said volunteers that are doing stuff for the city. I just don't want to get it confused with the volunteers that are volunteering to put on events that are out there that are not directly doing it for the city. So just want to make sure we differentiate the groups.
Yeah, basically, it would be on behalf of the city or for specifically a city-sponsored event. I think that's what you're saying. So if the city had something going on, such as the midnight movies or the moonlight movies, and we had CPA going out there, they would be doing it on behalf of the city at a city event.
Okay, but not for volunteers that are part of a 501c3 that's putting on an event at the Seawalk Pavilion. I mean, it's got to make sure we define the group correctly.
Yeah, I think we can define that pretty accurately. I think we're all on board with what you're saying. That makes sense. Any other comments? Councilor Dumont, is your hand still raised?
No, I'm thinking about what Corey said, and I agree with that. But I think with how we have the reimbursement aspect set up, that volunteers or employees have to submit their parking to their supervisor or the city entity for which they volunteer to work for, and that's how they get their reimbursement. Covers how 501c3 organizations wouldn't be able to, or any other organization wouldn't be able to get that reimbursement. So I agree with Chris. It's a great, simple idea that it's easy for us to keep track of.
But I just want to make sure that the people that were coming to do the fingerprinting and stuff, they are city employees to some extent.
They're volunteers.
Volunteers for the city of Jax Beach.
Okay.
They're not a volunteer with a.
It seems to be worded that way.
Well, we'll word our policy appropriately, but I understand what you're saying in terms of which group we want to make sure is not covered by the policy. Any other comments on this particular issue? Okay. Hearing none, we will move on to item 4, opening the skate park to organized events. I'm going to turn this one over to Jason Fatides. He'll talk a little bit about the background of the skate park down at Sunshine Park. And in particular, this issue came up because there's a private entity that was looking to hold some type of an event at the skate park itself. And Jason waved the flag and said there's a little bit of an issue based on past practice and conversations that were held with the community. So Jason, I'll let you tell the story from here.
Very simply, when we'd put in the turf field and during the construction of the skate park, the community, the residents within the area were concerned that we wouldn't commercialize those investments. And so our commitment to them was no, we wouldn't have, any special events that would do that. And then the other thing that we've got to bear in mind is the lack of parking. But there, as far as I know, there's no city policy that says we can't hold an event here. We were just being mindful of the residents and their wishes. And that's all I have, Mike.
And Jason, can you speak a little bit to the entity that wanted to hold an event on the park and maybe talk about what that event would look like?
So yes, this was Aqua East that had an event, I think 3 years ago at the park to coincide with their surfing contest. I think it was the East Coast Grom surf contest. They did come out and they held an event out here. We did get some pushback from some of the neighbors on that. But Mr. Stuart Lackey, who represents Aqua East and the event, had come out, and we had told him that, since we don't have a policy, we have a special events, arena that, is focused on providing that kind of activity down at Latham and Seawalk Pavilion. But Mr. Lackey, I know, went to council, I think it was in December of 2018, to ask council to look into that. And it was during a courtesy of the floor to the visitors. We didn't get any direction from council after that meeting.
Okay, and I see the first hand raised is Councilor Vogelsang.
I think it opens up the door to quite a few different things, as Jason mentioned. First would be, where do we draw the line? Now we want to start having organized events on the turf field, which obviously is utilized nightly by residents and visitors. And now we start opening that up for people to have events there. I think there's a liability from the skate park perspective. You might have a kid smashing their head open at the event or something like that, which would be something that we'd have to have insured, and whether we want to take on that liability or not would be difficult. I don't think we've ever have we allowed any events at it? Like, I guess at the Seawalk Pavilion, has there been any, I guess, sporting type events held at any of our parks ever?
Never.
Organized events?
Not that I know of, Mr. Vogelsang. There have been some sporting events down at Latham Seawalk area, but none of our park areas, no.
I just think from a parking perspective and a venue perspective, it just seems logical to have things at the pavilion. And if they wanted to have like a skateboard competition, I know that at a couple of the festivals, they had skateboarding and different ramps put up during those events and put them in the parking lot. I think that was acceptable, but to open it up to our parks in the residential neighborhood seems like a different animal that I think we'd get a lot of blowback on. That's just my 5 cents.
Vice Mayor Hoffman.
I just wanted to provide a little bit more information on this because I did speak with Mr. Lackey and one of the Aqua East owners a few weeks ago, and asked this to be brought back up in terms of a council briefing, because some of the things that they said really kind of struck me. And one of them is that a Grom Fest is targeted at younger members of our community. So those are the 8 years old. I think it's probably eight to preteen age kids. And the reason that they like our skate park so much is because it's so friendly to beginners, which is something that we were very intentional about when we set up the skate park. So they do not charge any participants, and they don't make any money from this event. It's really more of a promotional thing where they come out and they can do demos and things like that. So it's not like they're, and it stays open to the rest of the kids that want to use the skate park. So it's a late afternoon. I believe it's in October, sometime in the fall. Jason, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what the pushback was from the neighbors the first time it was held. Can you provide a little more detail on that, Mr. Fatides?
We had a number of neighbors that had called to complain, and the event kind of slipped in under the radar, so to speak. I think staff were fairly new and not really familiar with the special events policy. But yes, we got several calls from the neighbors. We even, in the park survey that we recently we got a lot of comments about the parking, people speeding down the west side of the park area. So I can't tell you how many exactly, but it was enough for us to pay close attention the following year and let Mr. Lackey know that he'd have to get the authorization from the city council.
So they just complained that the event was held in general. It wasn't a specific complaint about or potentially parking issues?
It was both. It was, they were concerned that, we were commercializing the facility and the parking was an issue. Even without events, parking is becoming an issue because of the popularity in the park. Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess, and just to kind of wrap up my comments, to me, this kind of goes under that category that we don't really have, which is that third party but city sponsored event. That is something I feel like there should be a way to pursue something like this. I don't know if this is exactly the right event, but something that we know is going to benefit our community, such as the Art Fest and the car cruise that we allow to come in and use our facilities, but with partnership of the city. To me, this would fall under that, not to say this is something we would automatically do, but this is something that we might consider in that category of events. Aqua East has been in our community for, I think, 40 something years now. And they're a great partner on a lot of the different surf schools and things that we do that are family friendly and embrace our surf and skate culture here at the beaches. So to me, when I hear it's targeted at young people in our community, it's free, it's a benefit to the people that participate in it. I just have to, I know there may be some drawbacks to it, but I weigh those very heavily in our conversations, where especially listening to community visioning in terms of what we're looking for in our community. So I would support at least investigating a way that we could, again, not necessarily this exact event in this way, but that we could potentially have this type of event that benefits our community, that we partner with them, such as the events that I mentioned downtown.
Don't see any other hands raised to weigh in on this. Anybody else want to provide any input?
I guess my question was answered by Chris, but is there any, it seems like there's a lot of group classes out there on the field, and I believe there's a couple that I've seen that, charge a nominal fee or whatever to be part of their group. Is that a problem, or is that something we're concerned about?
So up till now, Mr. Nichols, it has not been a problem. We enjoy the fact that our facilities are being used and appreciated. the teaching and the revenues generated by them, by those teaching, was only really an issue with the tennis court. And I think we resolved that by issuing a permit for that. Right now, we don't see the need to, warrant a permit to do the exercise classes. We think that, they're benefiting the community.
No, absolutely. I agree. I think they're great.
Mayor Latham?
My only comment is, when we have surfing competitions and things of that nature down at the beach, we don't prevent citizens from using the facility, using the ocean and the beach. My concern about this is that we are going to do that if we turn the skateboard park into a competition venue for an outside party. You're shaking your head, Chris.
They don't close the park. It's not a competition. It's just like an exposition kind of thing. As
So
my understanding, they don't close the park. It's open to all. So anyone can participate in this event.
Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't my understanding. So that answers my question. Thank you.
Is it just an open skate, or is it, Chris, you take a turn and you go down the skate park and then Phil goes or is it just like everybody goes skating and have a good day? It doesn't make sense.
We've probably already maxed out my knowledge of skateboarding in this conversation, but my perception is that it's kind of an open skate with demonstrations and giveaways of hats and stickers and stuff like that. So it's not a timed, or I think they probably do have some sort of competition element, but it's been told to me that the skate park remains open and that anyone can participate in this event, and they don't pay to participate.
Jason, couldn't they do that now? I mean, couldn't they just have, if it's legitimately an open skate, they could just create a Facebook invite and say, come skate at 12 o'clock tomorrow. We're all hanging out skating.
So Mr. Vogel saying, yes, they could do that now, because the park rule is simply first come, first serve. As long as we're not, restricting it to certain users. From what I could tell when they held the event, I think it was in 2017, they didn't close the park, but effectively, it was the demonstration skaters that were taking the park. And then they had some brief time intervals where everybody could skate, and then they stopped it, and then they had the demonstrators go and stuff. So it was organized. It didn't quite close everything down, but again, parking was an issue that day too.
I mean, I guess my direction to you, I don't know how the rest of the council would be, to let them know it's a open skate park. If they want to have a group of 8 or less aged kids come and meet there and open exhibition skate, they can do that. The issue would be stopping it so expert skaters can show off their skills for everybody to watch and say, ooh, that's cool. You can't do that. But if you want to have an open skate and invite kids to come and hand out giveaways and do all that other stuff, I don't think there's anything that would prevent them from doing it now, nor would it require a permit.
I think they are acting in good faith on wanting to have the blessing of the city before they organize and promote this event.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. I was going to say a lot of what Phil said already. I don't see what the difference is between a group of individuals using a lot of the park. We do that. I see exercise classes out there, and you get a whole chunk of an area, all the shade for morning HIIT classes. So they're not stopping other people from using other parts of the park, maybe not the part of the park that they want to use. I can see, I guess for me, I totally agree with Phil that there's nothing really stopping them now other than how the liability would fall. If it's being advertised as an event and something happens versus just open skate, there's a shift in liability. So would they need the insurance? And I'm taking it that's why he was kind of coming to the city. I'm not sure. I haven't spoken with the gentleman, but it's just that it's these little subtleties that when is something an event and when it is just a group of like-minded individuals watching really cool people skate. And I don't know how policy-wise you can really tease some of that stuff out. I understand the concern of the people who live in that area with parking, that park is always packed. It's always packed. And so I can understand that. And we had pushback, the city had pushback when they wanted to originally build the skate park from the neighbors around that park for that reason. So I am looking historically, but I can't see how we could stop an organization from doing something at the park without paying if it's open already to do the same thing that they're doing and they're not closing anything down.
I would just like to respond to Ms. Dumont. So yes, they could come and use the park as they want to give their exhibition or whatnot. It's just like, you know, we get a lot of soccer or football teams that want to come and book the field. We tell them, no, you are welcome to come and use the field, but then if others join in and they want to play as well or want to play in part of the field, you can't stop them. I think what Mr. Lackey was looking specifically was for a permit so that, you know, he could guarantee he had use of that park during those hours. And also there is a commercial element to that activity because they do sell hats and boards and, you know, other accessories and stuff. And so they do set up a commercial, you know, segment here in the park.
Thank you for that clarification.
And I see Mr. Mann has his hand raised. Bill?
Yeah, Mike, excuse me, Jason just hit on my point exactly. You can't discount the fact that this is primarily a promotional event for them. It's not so much that the kids are out skating. That skate park is phenomenally popular now. We don't necessarily need more attraction to that park, but they would like the presence there. The local surf shop community is highly competitive. This is a Neptune Beach surf shop. We've got a great surf shop in Jacksonville Beach. But the point is the advertising, the soccer mom tents with the branding, where do you stop? And I think the permit would legitimize their ability to set up, even if they're giving away free pizzas, you know, it's whatever the pizza brand is advertising, but the commercial component of it can't be discounted. And I was here when we did the original workshops where we broke up a room of seniors, residents, kids, and we intentionally put mixed groups at every single table. Every single table bought into the fact that we wanted a skate park out there. And at the same time, they bought into no lights, no commercialization of the field. So I think this is kind of a long-term commitment that we've made to those people. It's a great park. We like it, come see it. But just the commercialization side of it, I think is something that was always not really supported by the community, even 10, 12 years ago when we had these original strategy sessions. That's all I had to say. Oh, one more thing, sorry. And in terms of sporting events at Latham Plaza, you have to understand that's downtown. It's much more highly accessible. There are not single family homes ringing that park. And next year, I hope the permit stays. We're supposed to have the Nitro World Games here, which you talk about competitive sports. If you've ever watched X Games, it's phenomenal. So we'll have that type of event in the downtown area where it's a little more plausible. And this is it totally brought in, fabricated, set up on site, and they leave. It's just, if you can remember the Sports Illustrated, they had a huge setup downtown, but they come in overnight and set this thing up, and then 2 days later they're gone. It's just the setting down there is a totally different setting than out my window looking out Latham Plaza right now.
Thank you for the historical perspective, Bill. Back to Vice Mayor Hoffman and then City Attorney Ambrosio.
The Sports Illustrated setup, you are dating yourself, Bill. I just wanted to say, again, this is my understanding that they are not actually selling product, but they certainly are promoting product. But I could be wrong about that, but it was portrayed to me that no money is changing hands on site. And then I agree with Bill's point that there's a surf shop in Jax Beach too. I subscribe to that 3 beaches, 1 community phrase. I also grew up working at Aqua Surf Shop, so it has a special place in my heart. But again, if there was a away if we said no selling, no after dark, whatever the contingencies would be. Then if Sunrise wanted to do an event there, they would have an application process too. It could be as strict as we wanted it to be. I'm picking up the consensus that this probably isn't something that the council wants to move forward on, but I still feel like overall having a mechanism for, we don't want people just to come up and set up a skate demonstration without us knowing about it. I don't think Jason wants to look out his window and see that at the skate park on a regular basis. We don't want to encourage that, but if there was a way for people to actually apply and get approved or denied or whatever the case may be, because they do probably have microphones and merchandise tents and stuff like that for giveaways or pizza or whatever. It's not just coming and taking over the skate park for a day. If they're promoting that they're doing it at our facility, then there should be some agreement between us and them. I would think that we would want that.
And City Attorney Ambrosio.
Mike, I just wanted to remind and advise the council that there is a Florida statute in place that says that a governmental entity would not be liable to any person who voluntarily participates in skateboarding for any damage or injury to that person while they participate in the skateboarding activity, and which takes place on the area designated for such activity. So our skate park is clearly the designated area for skateboarding activity. It's been designed, professionally designed and installed and constructed that way. And if we ever have any skateboarder there participating in an event or just voluntarily using it on any given day, then that statute's in place for us to protect us from liability from any damage or injury that may occur. If we have a skateboarding event somewhere else in the city, then it may be argued that that new area isn't clearly designated for skateboarding. The argument would be that the city has a professionally designed, engineered, and installed, constructed skateboard park. That's where skateboarding activity was designated to occur for us to gain the benefit of the statute that would afford us to prevent us from being liable for any injury. So I just wanted to make that known and remind the council that such a Florida statute does exist. It's one of the benefits of us having that skateboard park installed, is we have a Florida statute that protects the city from liability for injury as a result of someone voluntarily participating and electing to skateboard at that designated area.
Thank you, Chris. And Mayor Latham.
The only thing I'd like to add is that, I remember in our discussions as a council when we were talking about this and going through a few of the workshops on this round that actually led to the production of the skateboard park. And residents were really concerned about numbers and lights and everything else. And it just kind of seems like we're going in the opposite direction here. The other thing is, we've got Sunrise Surf Shop, we got Jack's Beach Surf Shop, we got Austin Surf Shop. We got several surf shops in Jack's Beach, and I'm having a hard time putting my arms around why we would benefit other, kind of let somebody from another city come over and use our area as though it's a promotional activity for them. Maybe if we made it available to all surf shops for one day or something where they could put out booths and it wasn't geared toward somebody outside of Jacksonville Beach. That was built with tax dollars, and a lot of the tax dollars, property tax dollars we get comes from businesses. And so I'm kind of opposed to segmenting the park, or even if I can't imagine in 100 years that a surf shop would want to come over and set up an established event that wouldn't in any way interfere with everybody being able to surf, skateboard if they wanted to skateboard. So I'm leery. I'm open-minded about it, but I'm a little bit leery. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I think I've received adequate direction on this particular item. With that being said, it's 6:38. We've only got about 7 minutes left before we have to break and get ready for the 7 o'clock meeting. I'll give the council the option. Do you want to dive into the renaming of city parks, buildings, and facilities policies, or do you want to hear a mobile food truck update from the city attorney?
think the update would be far more easier than a discussion.
City Attorney Ambrosio, take it away.
Okay, we're going to update the mobile food mobile food dispensing vehicle sections of the code and the mobile food dispensing vehicle application packet. And we have to do that in order to adapt to a new Florida law that is essentially another preemption law where regulation of mobile food dispensing vehicles involving licenses, registrations, permitting, and fees is preempted to the state. There is a section of the statute, it's 509.102, that does allow us, this municipality, to continue the authority to regulate those dispensing vehicles in ways other than licensing, registration, permitting, or any other fees. So there are sections in our code, many sections, mostly involving Chapter 34, that we would need to revise and amend and redraft to some extent so that we're not in violation of this preemption. We have already done probably 95% of the work to revise our mobile food dispensing vehicle application packet. It's no longer a permit application packet. It's serving mostly as an informational guide. And also it still contains a property owner's affidavit so that the property owner where the proposed vehicle will be stationed, that property owner has to complete a detailed affidavit that provides us with information that we're going to require to allow the vehicle. Again, we're not permitting the vehicle anymore. We're not registering. We're not issuing a license because, again, that's been preempted to the state. But we are going through an allowance process still, that we still retain some regulatory rights and authority. And the packet also still requires a local business tax receipt, which is, again, another regulatory activity that hasn't yet been preempted. So that's a very brief update. The ordinance the drafted ordinance would eventually go to Planning Commission because we'll be making revisions and amendments to the LDC. And then after Planning Commission has a chance to review that, it'll be coming to the council for first reading. And I've worked with, I guess, 3 different departments to revise the packet, the application information packet for potential vendors. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Councilor Dumont, your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. So the preemption from the state does not say anything about where they can operate. Because I remember reading it, it said within the city on the regulate on what how we can legislate them, but they still are not able to operate on public land, correct? And we can have it only 1 food truck per, I think it's 1 per private property currently.
Right. We can, well, we're still allowed to regulate it in terms of the zoning, the numbers on a particular property, the number of trucks on a particular property. We can still regulate them in terms of which zones of our jurisdiction they're allowed to operate in. So we do retain those types of regulatory activities. However, one of the sentences in the statute says that a municipality may not prohibit a mobile food dispensing vehicle from operating within the entirety of the jurisdiction, meaning we can't completely ban these vehicles from our city, but we can, through our regulatory authority, limit them to certain zones. And we're going to have them available in 5 zones. So we're very food truck friendly, I would say.
Okay, I wasn't sure how you were going to interpret the entirety of the city. That's how I hopefully read it. So thank you for that clarity.
Yeah, they're setting the rule that we cannot completely ban them, but we can regulate them to some limitation of the zones.
Any other questions for Chris on this item? Hearing none, that'll wrap up the briefing agenda for tonight. Item 5, which was the renaming of city parks, buildings, and facilities, and I believe also included the honorary street renaming policies. We will push that out to the next council briefing for further discussion. So we'll tackle that one at the next one. With that being said, I guess we all have a 5 to 10 minute break before we get back on the next call for the start of the 7 o'clock meeting. So hopefully 15 minutes is enough time for everybody to take a break. See you all shortly.